And here we are. Welcome back. And we're talking about protein today. So this is what I want you to understand. This is what I want to make sure you're taking away. Where you can get your protein sources from, the most beneficial ones, the ones that might end up being considered more optimal, understand how other non-optimal ones may fit in, but they're not wrong. Then I want you to understand how much protein you need and then where to go to get some of these just off the bat to get you started, okay? So I first want to make sure that we can all agree that protein is important. And for you to understand this a little bit more, beyond this video, go to my website, foodisfuelnyc.com/blog. It's going to have everything I talk about and even more. It's also going to have, at the end of that blog, a lot more recommendations around some snack foods, some things you can keep around that are going to be high protein to make sure you can hit your goals for #1, muscle maintenance. So check it out, clickable links, you can buy right away if you need them. This video will also be on there, so if you feel like looking at this on a different kind of platform, that'll be there as well. But anyway, welcome back. Thank you for being here. Protein. Again, can we all please just make sure we know that it's important? But why? Right? So when I end up talking about nutrition, what I'm always trying to do is get you to understand that we're looking to maintain muscle mass at all times. We want you to maintain your body. And if anything happens to your body, say there's a breakdown of some sort within your body always wants to get back to some sort of equilibrium, some sort of even base. So if you end up losing muscle, it's going to fight to get back to it. But what I want to make sure you're doing is eating enough protein to maintain yourself. Now, muscle is not only going to be your biceps and your chest and your quads and your butt, right? Now, muscle is more around things like your cardiac muscle as well, right? So we have your heart muscle, we have your smooth muscle, more around your organs. You don't want to do anything to compromise those. If you end up losing your bicep, well, you know what? That's not going to be as much of an issue as long as your heart stays healthy, right? But we want to make sure we're doing everything to maintain the muscle that's in your body. Now, protein. Protein is going to be coming from food, right? We have to make sure we supply our body with protein. Now, protein is made up of small pieces, and we've heard this before almost ad nauseum. But this is where you want to know that a protein that ends up going to work in your body, that's made up of small little pieces called amino acids, and there's 20 of them. Now, there's certain ones that are essential and other ones that are non-essential. By essential, that means that it has to come from food and your body cannot make any of it. Now, your non-essential ones are things that your body can actually make, okay? So you don't have to know which ones those are. If I actually pushed myself to say all of them, I probably would get some wrong. But I want to make sure you know that there are going to be protein sources, food sources, that are going to have all of those and some that are going to have only partial of those, right? But we have to be getting those amino acids from our food to now make a complete protein to go to work within your body. And there are going to be some foods that are going to have all of those little pieces, all those puzzle pieces to make a complete protein to now go to work in your body. Okay? And that tends to be a lot of your animal proteins, which does not mean that we end up having plant proteins that aren't going to be complete either. So we have animal proteins that can normally just go right to work in your body. They are considered more bioavailable, right? Because they can be absorbed fast and they go to work right away. Now we also have things that are non-complete proteins, which can be things like, say, some things around beans, peanuts. We can have things like rice, bread. Those are things that don't have all of those amino acids, and that's going to end up being an incomplete protein. But there are some plant proteins that are complete, and those can be as easy as things like tofu, tempeh, seitan, edamame. We have buckwheat, quinoa, chia seeds. We're going to have nutritional yeast. Those can all be complete proteins, and there's more. That's not an exhaustive list. But those are going to be plant proteins that you can end up eating that have all of those amino acids together. Now, the only thing about that is that those plant proteins can't be as readily absorbed and put to use right away in your body. That's not a problem. You just need to make sure that maybe you're doubling up on those sometimes, or just making sure you're getting enough. Now, your animal proteins can sometimes be found a lot easier. They can be cooked a lot easier. They can even be cheaper in some kind of ways. But when we end up looking at things like plant proteins, they may not be as easily, as readily available. They may not be as cheap to kind of produce at some point, and they might not be as enjoyable for some. Now that's a preference for some people, but there's no good or bad protein. That's what I want you to know. When we look at proteins, they are either complete or incomplete, and you just have to find out how to complete them. So outside of those plant proteins that are considered incomplete, you can now pair those ones up. So things like those what we call complementary proteins. So things like beans and rice, peanut butter and bread, right? Peas and pasta, right? What we can do is now pair foods up, and it can have all of those amino acids together, so you can get those. But again, when we look at things like your complete proteins, animal proteins, and a lot of our plant-based proteins, our animal proteins are more bioavailable. It means it can get to work a lot quicker in your body, which then it can reduce things like muscle soreness. It can really just maintain muscle mass just a little bit more optimally, okay? So just understand kind of how, like, where they are really going to be coming from. What I also want you to know is that there are tables. There's so many things that you can kind of see about how much protein is going to be in, like, say, like a 3 or 4 ounce piece of chicken versus like a cup and a half of like beans and rice, right? So like say 3 ounces, or like the size of your palm or your cell phone, we've heard about those before, that can have the same amount of protein as what's going to be in like a cup and a half or 2 cups of rice and beans. So those are called equivalents, and you can figure out, if you know how much protein you need, you can look at lists like that and then start to break down how you actually take in those, and you can look on my blog to see a little bit more about that. The other thing that I need you to know is how much protein to actually be taking in. Now, everybody's different, but I want you to understand that no matter how you decide to get your protein, you're not wrong. You just have to make sure that you're doing it in a way that works for you. But the amount of protein you need does not change for really anybody. But if we look at the guidelines more of like the national guidelines, or really from the Institute of Medicine, we're gonna see that what the general recommendation is for someone to be getting enough protein in is 0.36 grams per pound. So 0.36 grams per pound is what our government and like the Institute of Medicine is going to tell us to get. But I don't know what studies are looking at, but the studies they look at are not really showing muscle maintenance long term as we age, or even for an active population. So that ends up being low when we actually look at what maintains muscle for people. So how can you end up maintaining muscle? More generally, what I can tell you right now, and again, you can go and check out more on my website, generally I would say 0.64 to 0.9 grams of protein per pound. That's how much you may end up needing. So if you make that calculation, your weight in pounds times 0.64 to 0.9, and you look at those protein equivalents that I just talked about, then you can figure out how you can fit protein throughout the day. It's what I do for people when we actually work one-on-one. But that number, right, that 0.64 to 0.9 grams per pound is when we start to actually see muscle maintenance in older populations and active populations. Optimal for my athletes I end up working with is really going to be somewhere between 0.8 and 1.1 grams of protein per pound. Now, it's a high number. It can be challenging to get there in terms of getting enough protein in, but you can definitely do it. Sometimes you may need to use some kind of supplementation. That's okay. But you want to understand, first of all, what protein is. Make sure you understand that protein is something that is used all over your body, not just for skeletal muscle, for cardiac muscle, for smooth muscle, for other processes that are going to end up happening within your body. So you need to make sure that you're getting your protein in. Look for protein sources that end up being complete. Animal proteins right away. There are going to be some plant proteins. Your soy proteins can definitely help. Buckwheat, amaranth, chia seeds, quinoa, those can all be complete proteins. And also understand about your complementary proteins. Pair things up to get all of your proteins together. Please also understand how much protein you need. So make sure, if you're looking for a general recommendation, 0.64 to 0.9 grams of protein per pound. For my more active people that are looking to grow muscle or maintain muscle optimally, 0.8 to 1.1 grams of protein per pound. That's going to be a lot better for them. All right, but check out my website. My website ends up having on my blog, it has recommendations from me in terms of food, mainly kind of like snack foods for right now, outside of the general like chicken or fish, but you're going to have those snack foods there along with some supplementation recommendations as well. So please check out my website, look at these recommendations, understand how protein fits and how important it is for you, and you can start to maintain your muscle mass even more optimally. All right, okay, guys, if you have questions, leave a comment, leave a like, share, let me know if you're enjoying this content and if it's beneficial to you. Thanks for listening.